I'm joined now by Defence Minister Peter Dutton. Peter Dutton, thank you so much for your time. You seem in a great hurry, as I've just explained, all the decisions you've been making recently. What's been driving you? What is your concern, the need for haste?
Well, Andrew, I think there are a number of projects where we had concerns, and I want to rectify those quickly. I want to make sure that we have a successful pivot. We've had 20 years in the Middle East, which is a particular style of conflict and battle engagement, and that is now over. So the threat for us is in the Indo-Pacific, and we need to be realistic about what the coming decades might hold. We need to be prepared for any eventuality there, and we need to make sure that the Defence Force is absolutely focused on that task. And so for many reasons, I believe that we should make the decisions to deal with those urgent issues and to allow the Defence Force to do what it does best to keep Australians safe, and they've done that for generations, and that's what we ask of them and what we respect them so much for doing. And I think we've got a lot to be very thankful for. Both our serving men and women and our veterans have made our country what it is today, so we owe them a great deal, as you know.
Yes, but it's the urgency that gets me. I mean, there's no doubt that you have put it on fast forward after we've been meandering for so many years. Now, last night I went through that RAND Corporation report that was done for the ADF. It makes clear that it thinks our armed forces aren't ready for a war of total defence. Our industry isn't ready. Australians are not ready. Do you agree that our mobilisation plans are in a real mess?
Well, Andrew, a couple of points. I mean, one is that Australia wants peace in our region. We want to make sure that we work with our near neighbours. We don't tolerate a compromise of our sovereignty. We're already seeing a 60% increase in the number of ransomware attacks from both state actors, including Iran and China, North Korea and others, sophisticated crime groups as well, targeting Australians online, attacking health and aged care facilities, hoovering up information. So we're already, if you like, in that battle, and I think Australians should be very clear about that. And so there's an enormous amount of effort that we've put into the cyber defences for our country, and not only our defences but also the offensive capacity that we have to disrupt these crime groups and others that would seek to do us harm online. So I think that is a really important point to make. Secondly, we want to make sure that if we're making decisions about procurement today, about investments, and we're putting $270 billion in over this decade into equipment for the Australian Defence Force. In many cases, that can take a number of years lead time before we take possession of that particular equipment. So I want us to be in the best possible position, whatever might happen in the next decade, the decade beyond. I'm dealing with decisions now on subs or frigates, for example, that would have been taken many years ago. And I want to make sure that we've got every capacity and capability within the Australian Defence Force, and I think the Prime Minister's been very clear about that as well.
Yeah, I've got that, and of course you would want to do that. But what I'm struck with is this report saying, look, if the worst comes to in the past we've had defence commitments in Iraq or Afghanistan or East Timor. They're not existential threats to us. We could do it, we could not do it. It's not about getting the homeland or, supporting our troops. We can do it. But this report makes clear that in a war of what it calls total defence, where we are really committed, where we feel, well, it doesn't mention China, but if it's a war with China, for instance, we are not prepared. Has this been worrying you too? It says, for instance, we haven't got a narrative there to get people invested in the idea that we are going to have to help our armed forces.
Well, Andrew, look, let me deal with it this way. In extremis, we have an unbreakable alliance with the United States of America. We have a very significant relationship with our Five Eyes partners otherwise, the United Kingdom, Canada, and obviously we would rely on allies to provide us with assistance. If there was to be a conflict with a major power, there's no sense pretending that Australia could outstock the United States or China or somebody else in terms of our weaponry. I mean, that's just not realistic for a population of 25 million people on an island nation in the middle of the Pacific. So it's what makes our engagement and the depth of our friendship with the Americans so important. So that needs to be taken into account as well if you're asking about what would Australia's preparedness be for conflict within our own region. So the first priority is to maintain peace, to exert pressure to make sure that that peace is sustained, to make sure that people understand that if they were to inflict pain or attack Australia, that there would be a very high price to pay for that, either through the capabilities, some of which you talk about we are deficient in, and I'm making a very concerted effort to make sure that we can patch up that gap, and equally to do more with our most important ally, the United States. And I've spoken about my desire, as the Americans have their desire, to look at what additional assets could be located in our country, additional visits. We know that NATO and
I think that's really important.
And, you know,
I've got to interrupt you here.
The French, the Germans, and others are
because there's a division.
Andrew.
There's a division. You're called for. Your country needs you in the House. So I apologise.
I'm sorry that trumps my appearance, Andrew. It's nice to see you, and thank you for having me on the show.
Look, it was a pleasure having you, and we'll have to chew over some of the questions I wanted to ask about China at some other date. I appreciate the time.